My mom screamed, "Hand over the trust!" The moment my son stepped through the front door, his backpack still on, his little shoes squeaking on the tile, I said no, and then my brother slammed me to the ground. I remember the sound of my skull hitting the floor more than the pain. Blood, my son crying, and Gavrin smiling. If you've ever had to shield your child from the people who raised you, if you've ever wondered how far your family might go when they think no one's watching, stay with me. This story isn't just mine. It might be yours too, because nothing about this started with violence. It started with pressure, with guilt, with whispers over dinner and glances that made my skin crawl, and a lie I didn't see until it broke my son's heart. I'm Lirien Rhodes, 32, interior decorator, single mom, Boise, Idaho. I live in a cluttered little duplex with a backyard barely big enough for my son to chase butterflies in. Before I tell you how I stopped being the family doormat and became the woman who stood between them and what they wanted, subscribe. Just one click. It's small for you, but it means the world to those of us who bring these stories to life. But back then, I wasn't standing up to anyone. I was still picking pieces of gravel out of my elbow with trembling fingers, trying not to cry in front of my child. That afternoon started quietly, too quietly. The rain had stopped just an hour before, leaving the air sticky and the porch steps slick. I was vacuuming the hallway when the screen door creaked open. Taven's voice rang out high and happy. "Mom, I'm home!" Then everything cracked. Serene's voice tore through the living room like a blade. "Hand over the trust!" she shouted, already marching toward me, heels clacking on tile like gunshots. Her blouse was too crisp, her eyes too bright. That's when I realized this wasn't a visit. It was a siege. Taven froze. He still had one arm in his jacket, one shoe untied. I stepped in front of him. "No," I said. Then Gavrin moved, fast. I barely saw his hand before it struck my shoulder, spinning me to the floor. My head hit something sharp, a table leg maybe. The world swam. I remember the coldness of the tile, the smell of pine cleaner and coppery blood, and Taven's voice, breaking. "Mom!" I couldn't open my eyes, but I heard Gavrin snort. "She'll sign now." No one moved. Then I felt small hands on my wrist, my son's, shaking, warm. I'll call someone," he whispered. But he didn't need to, because Serene crouched beside me, her perfume too sweet, too thick. "You're scaring him," she hissed, like it was my fault. "This can be over, Lirien. Just sign the papers. You owe us that." "Owe them?" My teeth clenched. Blood bubbled on my tongue. I managed to sit up. My limbs trembled, but I pulled Taven into my lap. He clung to me like a lifeline, and I kissed the top of his damp hair. "I'm not signing," I said, voice like sandpaper. Gavrin's foot slammed into the floor beside us, hard enough to make Taven flinch. "You always thought you were better than us," he growled. "Guess what? You're not." And then I saw it. Serene leaning toward him, whispering something I couldn't hear. But the look they shared, it wasn't about me. It was about something else. A plan. Later that night, I sat on the edge of Taven's bed as he slept, his little chest rising and falling beneath the spaceship-printed blanket. My hand hovered above a bruise forming on my arm. Every breath hurt, but that look, the one between them, it hurt worse, because it meant this wasn't over. They had a plan, and I didn't know what it was, or how far they'd go to break me. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains like it didn't know what had happened the day before, like it didn't care. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the cracked ceramic bowl in front of me, Cheerios turning to mush and milk I didn't remember pouring. My wrist throbbed where Gavrin had twisted it. I kept my other hand wrapped protectively around Taven's shoulder as he drew quietly on the placemat. He hadn't said a word since last night, not even when I tucked him in or when I sang our bedtime song. That silence, his silence, was louder than any scream. I thought I'd gotten used to pain, but nothing prepares you for watching your child shut down. My phone buzzed. "Mom." I didn't answer. I couldn't. The bile rose too fast. Instead, I got up and poured the cereal down the sink. The splash of cold milk reminded me I was still here, still alive, still Taven's mother, still their target. I turned to grab his drawing, thinking it would be another spaceship or a Pokemon. It wasn't. It was me, on the floor. Gavrin's fist raised, blood on my temple, and in the corner, a tiny Taven crying. I sat down hard. "Sweetheart," I managed. "Why did you draw this?" His voice came out in a whisper. "So I don't forget." My throat tightened. I reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "I don't want them to come back," he said. "Do we have to see them again?" I wanted to lie. God, I wanted to tell him no, that we were safe, that monsters didn't come in nice clothes and bring cookies on holidays. But all I could say was, "I'm going to protect you, no matter what, even if I had to destroy the only family I had left." Later that day, I found myself scrubbing the floor where I'd bled. On hands and knees, sponge in one hand, the other bracing against the pain that flared every time I leaned too far. I told myself it was just about cleaning, but it wasn't. It was about erasing their fingerprints, taking my space back, inch by painful inch. I was halfway done when I heard the knock. 3 soft taps. I froze. My mind sprinted through possibilities. CPS? Police? Gavrin? When I opened the door, it was her. Serene, in full makeup, lipstick perfect, hair sprayed into a helmet of composure. She stepped inside without waiting. "You're still in pajamas," she said, like that was the crime. "What do you want?" She looked around the room like it disgusted her, as if she hadn't raised me and worse. "To talk." I didn't move. My body was taut, every muscle coiled, waiting. "You're being dramatic," she continued. "We just want what's fair." "Fair?" I almost laughed. "You mean the trust?" I said. Her lips twitched. "You wouldn't even have that money if it weren't for us. You think your father left it just for you out of love? No. He pitied you." I could feel my nails digging into my palm, but I didn't flinch. "You forced me to skip meals as a kid," I said. "Told me I had to sacrifice for the family, while Gavrin stole from Dad's wallet and you looked the other way." She blinked, slow, unbothered. "Everyone remembers things differently," she said coolly. Then she pulled a folder from her bag and set it on the table like a trap. "Sign the transfer. You can keep a portion, enough for Taven's school." I didn't touch it. Instead, my eyes flicked to her purse, left slightly open on the counter behind her. I spotted something strange, a small silver key attached to a lavender ribbon. Serene never carried keys like that. She hated clutter, hated anything that hinted at disorder. She caught me looking. "Don't even think about snooping, Lirien," she snapped. "You already broke enough." I smiled, slow. "You'd be surprised what I've learned to fix." Her eyes narrowed. The air between us thickened. Then she leaned in close, breath like wilted roses. "You owe us," she whispered. "Everything you have is because of me, because I didn't leave you on the church steps when you were 6 and sick and screaming." The room went still. I didn't even feel my body until I realized my hands were shaking so violently I had to grip the edge of the counter to stop. "Get out," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cracked something. She paused, lips tight, then turned. But as she reached for her purse, her bracelet snagged, and a small velvet pouch tumbled out, landing with a soft clink on the floor. She scrambled to grab it, but not before I saw it. A tiny brass key, and a folded piece of paper with my name on it. "Leave it," I said. But she was already gone. My heart pounded. There was something in that purse she didn't want me to see. Something important. Something locked. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Taven, watching the rise and fall of his breath, listening to the wind tickle the blinds. Every creak of the house sounded like her voice, every gust like Gavrin's footsteps. But what haunted me most wasn't their threats. It was that key, that locked drawer, and the whisper I'd caught between them the night before. "The plan," she'd said. What plan? What else were they hiding? Because whatever it was only just beginning. It happened again before I had the chance to think, before I could change the locks, before I could stop the trembling in my hands every time the floor creaked. Gavrin didn't knock. He barged in. The screen door slammed against the siding so hard it echoed through the walls. Taven was in the hallway, holding a juice box. It slipped from his hand, splattering red onto the tile. I stepped in front of him. Again, "Get out," I said. But Gavrin didn't even look at me. His eyes darted past, scanning the living room like a man on a deadline. I could see it in his posture, that low, tense coil in his shoulders, his fingers twitching. Something was different. He was more desperate. "I'm not here to talk," he growled, moving toward me. I stepped back, my heel hitting the edge of the rug. Taven whimpered behind me, clutching my shirt. My heart beat so hard it felt like it shook the floorboards. Gavrin's hand lashed out, grabbing my wrist. "Sign the damn papers," he hissed. "No." His grip tightened. Pain flared, shooting up my arm. I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood. "You think you're special?" he snarled. "You think you deserve that money more than us?" "I think I deserve safety," I spat, "in my own home." Then he shoved me. Hard. I hit the arm of the couch sideways, falling to the floor again. The same spot as last time. My hip screamed. I couldn't tell if it was from the fall or from everything still buried inside me that hadn't healed. Taven screamed, but Gavrin didn't flinch. He leaned over me, wild-eyed. "This is your last chance. Sign it, or I'll take it anyway." Then, something slipped from his pocket as he leaned forward. A photo. It fluttered to the ground like a dead leaf. I grabbed it before he noticed, my hand moving fast on instinct. He stormed out before I could speak, slammed the door so hard the glass in the kitchen window rattled. Silence. Then Taven's small voice. "Mom, are you okay?" I nodded, but my body said otherwise. My ribs ached, my jaw clenched so tight I couldn't speak. I sat up slowly, holding the photo in my shaking hands. It wasn't a family picture. It was Gavrin, standing with a woman I didn't recognize. She had red hair and a crooked smile. They looked close, too close. But it was what was behind them that made my blood run cold. A courthouse. Why would he carry this? Who was she? The photo wasn't new. The edges were bent, fingerprints smudged, worn, like he'd held on to it, like it meant something. I tucked it beneath the couch cushion just as Taven wrapped his arms around my neck. "He can't come back, right?" he asked, voice tight and scared. I didn't answer, because I didn't know. Later that night, I stared at the photo again. There was something about her. Not just the closeness, not just the place. There was recognition at the edge of my memory, like a name I'd once known, now just out of reach. I flipped it over. No date, no writing. I ran my thumb across Gavrin's face. He looked younger, smug, proud even, not like the man who just shoved his sister to the ground for money. Whoever she was, she mattered to him. Maybe more than I did. Maybe more than Serene did. The next day, I sat at the park while Taven climbed the monkey bars, my sunglasses shielding the bruise blooming across my cheekbone. The July heat pressed against my skin, thick and humid, but I couldn't stop shivering. I didn't even see her coming. Serene sat down beside me like we were old friends meeting for coffee. "I heard about yesterday," she said. "You've really pushed him too far." My jaw tensed. "You sent him." She didn't deny it. "He wouldn't act like this if you weren't so stubborn. He's just trying to clean up your mess." I turned to face her. The sun caught in her earrings, polished pearls that matched the ones she'd worn to my father's funeral. "You're calling this my mess?" "Lirien," she sighed, "we gave you so much, and you're throwing it away." "You always were ungrateful." A gust of wind lifted the edge of her scarf. Beneath it, I saw a red welt along her neck, fresh. Gavrin had grabbed her too. My stomach turned, not out of sympathy, but realization. He wasn't just desperate, he was spiraling, uncontrolled. "What's he hiding from you?" I asked. She blinked. "Excuse me?" "He's not just doing this for you. There's something else, someone else." She stood. "We're done here." But as she walked away, I saw her slip a hand into her purse, checking, nervous, and I knew. They weren't on the same side anymore. That night, I pulled the photo from its hiding place again and studied every inch, and then I noticed it, barely visible in the background. A plaque, etched into the stone wall, Chambers County Clerk, Probate Division A Courthouse. A trust dispute, a woman I didn't know, and Gavrin smiling like he'd already won. I felt it then. That shift, the twist in the game. This wasn't just about a trust fund, it was personal, and someone else was pulling his strings. I kept the photo tucked inside my pillowcase for 2 nights, not because I was hiding it, but because every time I looked at it, I saw something new. A shift in Gavrin's smile, a tilt in the red-haired woman's body, that plaque in the background almost taunting me. The woman haunted me, like she knew something about my life I didn't. But before I could figure out who she was, Taven began drawing shadows. He used to fill his sketches with color, wild reds and bright yellows, robots and rockets and planets with smiley faces. Now his crayons made gray stick figures, all of them crying. One with red scribbled across the forehead, me. He handed it to me in silence after breakfast. "Is this how you feel, sweetie?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded, still chewing his cereal. His little feet didn't even touch the floor yet. I folded the picture and slid it into the drawer beside my bed. Then I hugged him so tight he wriggled. "Do you think they'll come back?" he whispered. That question stayed with me all day, through laundry, through dishes, through the sound of the mailbox slamming shut. They'd already come back, twice, and each time it was worse. Later that evening, I tucked Taven into bed early, then pulled the curtains tight. I sat at the kitchen table, the overhead bulb humming faintly. I hadn't turned on the TV in days. It felt too loud, too cheerful. I opened my laptop and typed, Chambers County Clerk Probate Division. It wasn't even in Idaho, it was in Oregon. I clicked through the site, my fingers jittery, and then something caught my eye. A scanned docket, 6 months old, case dismissed due to lack of standing. Petitioner, Gavin Rhodes. My heart dropped. He'd tried to claim something and failed, but what? I barely had time to process before the doorbell rang. My whole body snapped upright. I didn't breathe. Then again, 3 short chimes, too polite for Gavin. I opened the door a crack. Taven's teacher stood on the porch holding a manila envelope, her expression tight, professional, with an undertone of worry. "Hi, Ms. Rhodes, I hope I'm not intruding." I stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door closed behind me. The air was hot, buzzing with insects. "It's about Taven," she said softly. "We noticed a change. He's been quiet, withdrawn, drawing things that worry the school counselor." My throat burned. I didn't know what to say. "He's a good kid," she added quickly. "But if something's going on at home—" Her voice trailed off. I forced a smile that felt like splintered glass. "We're safe," I said. "Thank you for checking." She didn't look convinced. As soon as she left, I bolted the door. Every lock, every window. Then I sat in the dark and let the guilt eat me alive. I was trying to protect him, but it was already too late. He was breaking, and the cracks were mine. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor next to his bed, watching his chest rise and fall. The next morning, I found him sitting in the backyard, barefoot in the grass, holding his drawing pad in his lap. He didn't hear me come out. "What are you working on?" I asked gently. He held it up, a picture of me, smiling, holding his hand, and behind us, black shapes, tall, with no faces. "Are those monsters?" I asked. He nodded. "But they don't win." That was the moment something inside me shifted. I couldn't undo what he'd seen, but I could change what came next. Later that afternoon, I dug into the hall closet and pulled out the box I hadn't touched since Dad's funeral. A rusted lockbox with a broken hinge and old receipts stuffed inside. I was looking for the original trust document, something I'd only seen once, something Serene had insisted I leave with the lawyer. But instead, I found something else. A folded sheet of thick paper stained with age. I opened it with trembling fingers. Dad's handwriting. I knew it instantly. It was a letter. Short. Direct. "Lirien, if anything happens to me, this trust is for you. For your child, don't let them take it. They'll try. But you were always the one I trusted." My throat tightened. I hadn't even known this existed. At the bottom, a signature, his. And next to it, another one. Different. Faded. Smudged. But not mine. I never signed anything like that. Was it forged? I stared at the handwriting, my pulse racing. Serene had always said I gave consent, but I didn't remember. And now, it looked like someone else had tried to fake it. A noise from outside broke my focus. Taven was still in the yard, chasing something. A dragonfly. I pressed the letter to my chest. There was more here than I understood. More than just greed. More than just control. They were scared of something. Why else would they lie? Why else would they forge my name? That night I sat in bed with Taven asleep beside me. I watched the shadows crawl across the ceiling like slow, silent fingers. I had the letter now. Proof, maybe. But I didn't know what to do with it. And worse, I still didn't know who had forged my name, but I intended to find out. The night I found the letter, sleep became a stranger. I kept rereading my father's words. fingers tracing the faded ink like they might catch fire if I let go. But the thing that wouldn't leave me alone, the part that hooked itself under my skin, was the signature, the one next to his. It wasn't mine, and no matter how many times I stared at it, I couldn't make it become something familiar. By morning, the house felt like it had swallowed itself in silence, the kind that presses against your skin, waiting to break. Taven was curled up on the couch with his knees tucked under his chin, watching cartoons without laughing. The volume was barely audible, just a soft buzz over the sound of my thoughts unraveling. I walked to the kitchen to make tea, but paused at the window when I saw the driveway. Serene's car. It sat there, idling. I didn't move, just stared, heart galloping in my throat. Then it pulled away, slow, deliberate, like she wanted me to know she'd been watching. And maybe that she wasn't alone. I checked the locks, every door, every window, again. That's when I remembered the letter from the trust box, my father's handwriting, and that little sliver of possibility he left behind. Something about that forged signature kept scratching at my brain. Who would dare sign for me, and why? Later that afternoon, I waited until Taven was napping, his arm wrapped tight around a stuffed bear he hadn't touched in months, before I went outside. Serene had left her purse here once, a week ago, when she stormed out mid-threat. I hadn't looked inside then. I hadn't dared. Now I couldn't stop myself. It was still in the coat closet, tucked behind a pile of winter boots. I held it like a snake that hadn't bitten yet. The leather was stiff and cold. I unzipped the largest pouch first. Loose change, lipstick, a small mirror. Nothing useful. But in the side pocket, a key. And a crumpled envelope. No stamp, just a few smudged words. RH Trust, update requested. Inside was a photocopy of a typed letter, legal sounding, dry, but one part made my pulse spike. Per your request, the name has been redacted for privacy. Client confirmation is required for next steps. A paragraph was blacked out, sloppily, like someone had done it with a Sharpie in a rush. Who was redacting what? And why? I stuffed the envelope into my sweatshirt pocket and shoved the purse back where it was. I didn't dare take the key. Yet. By dinner, I was barely present. Taven asked if we could have pancakes again, and I said yes without thinking. I made them too thin. He didn't notice, but he looked up from his plate halfway through and asked, "Why does Grandma hate us?" I dropped the spatula. The clatter jolted us both. He flinched. I reached for his hand immediately. "She doesn't hate you," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "She's just not very good at love." He didn't speak again. That night, after he fell asleep, I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at the envelope under the harsh white light. The Sharpie lines were thick, but I noticed something faint just beneath them. Impressions, like whoever wrote the letter pressed hard with the pen. I remembered something Dad used to do, something he taught me when I was 8. If you can't see the writing, feel it. I grabbed a pencil and lightly rubbed it sideways over the paper. Slowly, something began to appear. A name. I leaned closer. Gavin Rhodes. My stomach lurched. He was the one who requested the update, not Serene. And it wasn't months ago. The date in the corner said 3 weeks prior, so he'd gone behind her back. Whatever this trust was, whoever really owned it, he was desperate to keep it buried. Desperate enough to fake a signature. Desperate enough to pin me down in front of my son. That was the twist I hadn't expected. Not just their cruelty, but their fear. I was holding something they didn't want me to find, and that meant I needed to know more. The next morning, I waited until Taven was at school, then slipped into the garage where Serene had kept some of her old boxes since moving across town. I didn't even know why I looked there, just that I couldn't shake the need to dig. To peel everything open and look for what didn't want to be seen. The air smelled like dust and motor oil. I cracked open a box marked Medical Taxes and found more junk than I could sort until I saw it. A second copy of the trust papers, folded, yellowed, but this time no black marker, no redactions. And at the bottom, again, 2 signatures, my dad's, and a second one, crooked, slanted to the left, the same fake as before. Only this time there was a sticky note attached. It said, "Get notarized before Friday. Use Marla. She won't ask." Marla. That name hit me like a slap. Dad's old assistant, the one who suddenly stopped coming around after he passed. My head spun. I shoved the papers back and left the garage in a daze. I didn't know where Marla was now, but I knew one thing. If Serene and Gavin went this far to fake something, they were hiding more than money. They were hiding the truth, and I wasn't done digging. By the next morning, the garage felt colder. Not temperature-wise, Boise in July is a furnace, but cold in the way a place feels when you realize it's not just storage. It's a vault of lies. I sat at the kitchen table, letter in one hand, pancake untouched on the plate in front of me. Taven was humming to himself, drawing again. Something with wings this time. I wanted to shield him, wrap him in steel, but the truth was, I didn't know how to protect either of us anymore. The knock came at 9:13. I remember the time because I'd just checked the stove clock to see how late we were running. I wasn't expecting anyone. The sound was sharp, intentional. I opened the door slowly. Serene stood there, polished, composed. A soft smile on her face like she hadn't stolen half my childhood and tried to bury the other half in legal paperwork. "You look tired," she said. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "What do you want?" She took a step closer, ignoring the boundary like always. "I'm here to be reasonable," she said smoothly. "You're making this harder than it has to be." I didn't answer. She looked past me toward the door. "You're raising a boy, alone. You can't afford to drag this through courts, and if CPS finds out what's been happening here..." The threat wasn't even veiled. I clenched the doorframe so tightly my knuckles turned white. Then she smiled again. "All you have to do is sign. We can all move on." I stepped forward, lowering my voice. "I know about the forged signature." Her eyes flickered, just for a split second, but it was enough. "And I found the note," I added. "The one about Marla. She notarized something without me present. That's illegal." Her jaw tightened. I saw it. The flicker of panic. Then just as quickly it vanished beneath the icy mask she always wore. "You're confused," she said. "That document was a formality, and frankly, you're not in the best headspace right now. People are starting to notice." She didn't need to say more. CPS. Teachers. The bruises I hadn't been able to hide well enough. "You think you're going to scare me into giving up my son's future?" I asked, voice barely holding. Serene didn't answer, just turned on her heel and walked down the steps like she hadn't just threatened to dismantle everything I had left. Inside, Taven looked up from his drawing. "Was that Grandma?" he asked. I forced a smile. "Just taking out the trash." That night, I sat in the living room after putting Taven to bed, knees pulled to my chest, every light in the house off except the floor lamp. The bulb buzzed faintly, casting a lonely amber glow over the coffee table. I opened the voice recorder on my phone. My hand shook. "Entry 1, I whispered. July 18th. Serene Rhodes arrived this morning at 9:13 a.m. She threatened to call CPS if I didn't sign over the trust. I paused, swallowed hard. She also implied that she had people watching. She used the phrase, "People are starting to notice. I believe she's planning something." I ended the recording and saved it under a folder labeled Evidence for Hale. I didn't know who Hale was yet, but I knew I'd need someone eventually. I left the phone recording on the table, hidden beneath a folded dish towel. I had a feeling they weren't done coming. 2 nights later, I was proven right. I was brushing my teeth when I heard it, glass shattering. The sound punched through the house like a bullet. I ran barefoot into the living room. Taven was already there, standing by the couch, eyes wide. The sliding glass door to the backyard was in pieces, shards glinting on the floor like ice. Paint splashed across the walls, red, thick, smeared in 2 words, "You lost." I grabbed Taven and held him close. He clung to me, breath shaking. We didn't call the police. I didn't need a lecture about how this might be a misunderstanding or how it could have been kids. Instead, I took photos, every angle, every broken edge, every drop of paint, and then I whispered in Taven's ear, "We're not going to be scared." The next morning, I picked up a disposable recorder from the hardware store. Old-fashioned, analog, something I could keep hidden. I also printed copies of everything, the fake signature, the note about Marla, the photo of Gavin with the red-haired woman outside the courthouse. I wasn't ready to go to war, but I was preparing for it. That afternoon, I caught Serene watching from her car again. She didn't get out, just sat there with her sunglasses on, fingers tapping the wheel. I walked right up to the window and knocked. She rolled it down slowly. "This isn't going to end the way you think it will," I said calmly. Her lips curved. "It already has." Then she rolled the window back up and drove off. But her smile didn't reach her eyes. It never had. The morning after the vandalism, I woke to the sound of Taven crying in his sleep, not loud, just small sobs, like he was trying not to be heard. I crawled into his bed and wrapped my arms around him. His skin was warm, clammy with sweat. His lashes stuck together from tears he never let me see. I whispered, "I've got you," again and again, until he stopped trembling. But I didn't go back to sleep. I couldn't, because I had a feeling things were about to get worse. It came to a head 2 days later. I just finished sweeping the last of the shattered glass from the back door. Taven was inside coloring quietly, too quietly. I'd learned by now that silence was no longer peace. It was fear dressed in stillness. Then came the scream. Outside. I rushed to the front window and saw her, Serene, crumpled on the lawn, dress twisted, one shoe missing. A neighbor knelt beside her, panicked. I opened the door, heart pounding. "What happened?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. "She collapsed," the neighbor stammered. "She was barely walking and then just dropped," Serene groaned, eyes fluttering. "Ambulance," someone said behind me. "No," I said quickly. She's fine." I bent beside her, close enough to see it. The flicker, the slightest twitch of her lip, a wink. So quick it might have been a spasm, but it wasn't. My spine went cold. She was faking. I leaned in close and whispered, "What's the game?" She didn't answer, just moaned dramatically. Sirens wailed in the distance. I looked up to find Gavrin standing across the street, arms folded, watching. Something about the timing was too perfect, too practiced. And then came the knock at my door. 2 women, clipboard, name tags, calm smiles. Too calm. "Hi, Ms. Rhodes. We're from Child Protective Services." Of course they were. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. I let them in. Taven peeked from the hallway, eyes wide. The lead agent crouched beside him, voice syrupy sweet. "Hi there. I'm just here to talk to your mom, okay?" He looked at me for reassurance. I nodded, even though I felt like I was made of paper. They asked questions about school, about routines, about whether there were any incidents. I answered everything, tried to keep my hands from shaking. One of them noticed the paint on the living room wall, where I hadn't finished scrubbing off "You lost." She tilted her head. "Was that recent?" I nodded. 3 nights ago." "Did you file a police report?" "No," I said. "They wouldn't help." They wrote something down. That's when I realized this was the setup, the vandalism, the staged collapse, the perfectly timed CPS visit. They weren't just trying to scare me. They were trying to paint me as unstable, unsafe. They wanted Taven. After they left, I locked the door and slid down to the floor. My palms were damp. My ears rang. I didn't even realize I was crying until Taven crawled into my lap and wiped my cheek with his sleeve. "Did I do something wrong?" he whispered. I shook my head, pulling him tight. "No, baby. You're the only thing right." That night I dug out the folder again. The photo, the forged signature, the redacted letter. I laid them all on the floor like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that refused to click together. Then I remembered the voice recording, the one I'd started days ago. I hit play. Serene's voice crackled faintly in the background, threatening CPS. The timing, her tone. It was all there. And then faintly, the sound of her bracelet jingling. The exact same sound I'd heard when she collapsed on the lawn. She'd worn the same bracelet. I had proof. But who would listen? I remembered the sticky note. "Use Marla. She won't ask." Maybe Marla would. I spent the next morning calling every notary in the county. It wasn't until the 6th call that someone said, "Yeah, Marla used to work here. She retired last fall." "Do you have her forwarding info?" A pause. "We don't usually give that out, but I think she runs a mobile notary service now. You might try the business listings." I searched. And there she was. Marla G., certified notary, Caldwell area. I texted the number. "Hi, I'm trying to verify a trust document you notarized last year. Please call me." 2 hours later, my phone rang. Marla speaking. Her voice was soft, older, nervous. I explained the situation briefly, carefully. She was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "I don't remember notarizing anything for you, Ms. Rhodes." "I know," I said, "because you didn't. But someone told you I was there?" More silence. Then, "It was your brother. He said you were homesick, that he had your ID." A pause. "I'm sorry, I never should have done that." My heart pounded. "Can you confirm that in writing?" I'd need to speak to someone, maybe my attorney." "That's fine, I'll wait." After we hung up, I sat in the silence of the kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint buzz of a fly trapped in the window screen. I finally had something solid, but it might not matter if they could twist the story before I got to tell it. That evening, I checked the mailbox. Inside was a plain white envelope with no return address. I opened it. Inside was a photo of me, crying on the floor, from the night Gavrin shoved me down, and scribbled in red Sharpie across the image, "You're not the victim." I stared at the photo for what felt like an hour. Me, on the floor, my face twisted in pain, Taven just off frame, likely crying, and across the top in red, "You're not the victim." The handwriting wasn't Sorene's, and it definitely wasn't Gavrin's. That shook me more than I wanted to admit, because it meant there was someone else, someone who had access, who'd seen inside my house, who knew how to twist the knife just right. I tucked the photo into the file folder with everything else, sealed it tight, and shoved it to the back of the closet. For now. That afternoon, I sat on the back step, watching Taven draw dragons in sidewalk chalk. His tongue stuck out a little as he worked, eyes squinting in the sun. I thought about all the things I hadn't told him, about the father he didn't remember, about the trust he might never see. And then, like a sudden wind, an old memory hit me. It wasn't violent, just quiet. Dad's hands, weathered, calloused, holding mine across the kitchen table. He'd been showing me how to sign my name in cursive, back when I still mixed up my R's and S's. He used to call me his keeper of things, said I remembered the details no one else bothered with. "You see everything, Lirien," he'd said once. "One day that'll keep you safe." Back then, I didn't know I'd need to be. Now I couldn't survive without it. That night I couldn't sleep. The air was too still, the shadows in the room too long. I got up and padded barefoot to the kitchen, made tea, let the steam fog the window. And that's when I saw it, again. The same figure standing under the street lamp across from my house. Not moving, not talking, just there. I flicked off the light so I couldn't be seen and watched. After 5 full minutes, they turned and walked away. That made 3 nights in a row. I wasn't paranoid anymore. I was being watched. The next morning, I called the courthouse. Asked if I could review any trust disputes involving my father's name. The clerk hesitated, then asked me to hold. A long silence. Then she came back, softer now. "There's a sealed file here. We can't release details, but you're listed, along with someone named Gavrin Rhodes and a third party." I sat up straighter. "Can you tell me the name?" "I'm sorry, it's protected." "Is it a woman?" A pause. "I really can't say, Ms. Rhodes." I hung up and stared at the wall. A third party. So I hadn't imagined the woman in the photo. She was real, involved, maybe even central. But why? Later that day, I found Taven sitting on the floor in my closet, surrounded by files. He held the photo, that photo, in his hands. I rushed in, dropped to my knees. "Where did you find that?" My voice cracked louder than I meant. His eyes welled. "I was just looking for my rocket notebook. I didn't mean to." I grabbed the folder from his lap and shoved it back onto the shelf. He flinched. And that's when I saw it, a flicker of fear, in his eyes, of me. My heart shattered. I sat down beside him and pulled him into my arms. "I'm sorry, baby. I didn't mean to yell. You didn't do anything wrong." His cheek pressed against my shoulder, his voice barely a whisper. "Are they going to take me away?" The question hollowed me out. "No," I said. "Never." But even I didn't believe it anymore. That night, I opened a dusty photo album I hadn't touched in years. Family barbecues, Christmases, birthdays where Dad looked tired and Serene looked annoyed to be photographed. Gavrin always smirking like he knew the joke no one else was in on. Then I found it. A picture from when I was 17, Dad standing in front of the house with a woman in a navy pantsuit, not Serene, not anyone I recognized, but the red hair, the same as the courthouse photo. I turned the photo over. One word written in Dad's shaky scrawl, heir. My breath caught. She wasn't just involved, she was the reason. I looked closer. Tucked under her arm, a briefcase with embossed initials, JM. I flipped through the rest of the album in a frenzy, but there were no other pictures of her, just that one, the woman who might have held the key to all of it. I didn't sleep. Again. I sat on the floor of my closet, surrounded by photos, copies, scribbled notes, and one hard truth. Gavrin had always hated me because Dad chose me. But maybe Gavrin hadn't been the only one Dad left something to, and if this red-haired woman was who I thought she was, she might still be out there. She might know everything. The next morning, I opened the front door and found something on the welcome mat. Not a letter, not a threat. A torn piece of a trust document, burnt at the edges, just one line visible. In the event of multiple claimants, the trustee shall... The rest was gone. But I'd read enough. There was another heir, and someone was trying to erase her. The torn trust fragment sat on the kitchen table like it was breathing. I stared at the words, multiple claimants, until they blurred. Someone had gone to the trouble of burning this and leaving it on my doorstep. That wasn't just a threat. It was a message. I wasn't the only one digging. By now, my walls were covered in pinned photos and notes. Strings of connection. Dated copies of signatures, the courthouse photo, the red-haired woman, the name JM circled in red ink. Gavrin and Serene weren't just trying to take the trust. They were hiding what Dad left behind, or who. But I hadn't connected the final thread, yet. The next morning, I woke before Taven and sat with my laptop in the dark, scrolling through old legal filings. I searched the probate court site again, this time by Gavrin's name. That's when I saw it. Not a case. Debt records. 3 credit card lawsuits, 1 foreclosure notice, and a defaulted business loan, all dated before he ever showed up demanding I sign anything. So that's what this was. It wasn't about family or fairness. It was survival. He was broke and desperate. I opened a recent filing. Lien against property in Caldwell, collateral pledged, inheritance trust interest. I froze. He'd already bet on money he didn't even have. And worse, it meant there was someone on the other side of that deal, someone who might come collecting if he lost. My skin prickled. I reached for the disposable recorder I kept by the coffee machine and whispered into it, July 22nd, 5:11 a.m., found evidence of Gavrin's financial collapse. He's already leveraged the trust, meaning he's got more to lose than me. I hit stop and tucked it away. When Taven woke up, he wandered into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, then froze when he saw the table. "Why is there a knife on your folder?" he asked, voice small. I turned. It wasn't mine. A clean, straight-edged paring knife. Right on top of the documents I'd been working on last night. No note, no blood, no prints, just presence. I wrapped my arms around him instinctively and pulled him close. They had been inside. That was the only explanation. I didn't call the cops. I knew how that would go. Instead, I packed Taven's things, dropped him off at school early, and drove to the address listed on one of Gavrin's old court documents. An auto shop, shuttered, rusted gate hanging open, overgrown weeds everywhere. But someone had lived there, once. I circled the back, a locked shed, padlock rusted but intact, and something taped to the door, a faded utility bill, not in Gavrin's name. Jeremiah Marks, initials JM. My pulse picked up. I took a photo and drove straight to the county clerk's office. Marla had mentioned notarizing something she regretted. I didn't want to wait for her lawyer anymore. Inside the records office, the clerk barely glanced up as I handed over the printed photo. "Do you have a name to search?" "Jeremiah Marks, possibly connected to Gavrin Rhodes. I'm looking for any trust liens or filings involving either name." She tapped at her keyboard for a long minute, then frowned. "There's a lien from a private investor, 5 months ago. Address matches." I leaned in. "Who's the investor?" She looked hesitant. I can't release that without a subpoena. I exhaled. Can you confirm whether the investor has filed any complaints, claims against the trust? She hesitated, then nodded. Filed last week. Wants repayment or access to asset. It's flagged. So Gavrin's deal was falling apart, and someone dangerous was getting involved. As I turned to leave, she added, "There's one more name listed on the claim." I stopped. She glanced at the screen. Secondary cosigner, Lirien Rhodes. My stomach turned. Lirien had backed the loan. She wasn't just covering for Gavrin, she was in it with him, which meant if the truth came out, not only would they lose the trust, they'd owe someone who didn't care about blood or betrayal, just repayment. That night, I lit every lamp in the house. I couldn't sleep, couldn't rest. I sat with my knees pulled to my chest, watching the shadows stretch under the doors. Every creak made me flinch. Then, around midnight, the house phone rang. I didn't even remember we still had one. I picked it up, hand trembling. A man's voice, low, controlled. "You're making it worse for everyone. Walk away." Click. No name, no threat, just certainty. Like he knew I'd listen. But I wasn't going anywhere. The next morning, I drove past Lirien's condo, parked 2 blocks away, waited. Sure enough, she came out. I followed her to a quiet diner on the edge of town. She wasn't alone. A man was already waiting at her booth. Red tie, black leather briefcase. When she sat down, he slid something across the table. I watched through the window as she opened it, and froze. Her expression cracked, for the first time. She shook her head. He tapped the table once, then stood and walked out. She didn't follow. Whatever he'd handed her, it wasn't good. I drove home before she saw me, and that night in my inbox, an anonymous email appeared. Subject line, "Ask him about the woman." Attachment, 1 scanned document, a receipt. Hotel check-in, 2 names, Gavrin Rhodes, Gillian Mercer. My hands went cold. JM, not Jeremiah Marks, Gillian. She wasn't just involved, she was real, and she was alive. The name Gillian Mercer felt like thunder in my chest. Not just a name, a shadow that had been circling the edges of my story. Silent, powerful, unacknowledged. And now she had a face, a file, and a direct tie to Gavrin. I stared at the hotel receipt long after the screen went dark. Dated just 4 months before Dad died. 1 room, 2 names. Everything suddenly tilted. Was she Dad's secret, a second heir? The woman in the red-haired courthouse photo? Or was she something worse, someone Gavrin had used to sabotage the trust from within? Either way, I had to find her. But I couldn't do it alone. The next morning, I left Taven with a neighbor who owed me a favor and drove to the Boise police station. I didn't walk in shaking this time. I walked in with a flash drive, a folder, and 2 months' worth of scars they couldn't ignore anymore. I asked for someone named Hale. They gave me a skeptical look, until a tall man stepped from behind the glass partition. Coffee in one hand, eyes sharp. "Detective Hale," he said. "You called?" I followed him into a narrow office that smelled like burnt printer toner and air freshener trying too hard. I laid everything out on the desk, the recordings, the documents, the vandalism photos, the forged signatures, the CPS ambush, the threats, and finally, the connection between Gavrin and Gillian Mercer. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he leaned back slowly. "This is a lot," he said. "I know." "And you're telling me your own family tried to frame you, forge your signature, threaten your custody?" "Yes." He looked at me hard. Not skeptical, just quiet. Then he said, "This could get ugly." I nodded. "I need it to get ugly, because it already is." He leaned forward again, more serious now. "I can't promise much, but I can make some calls. If what you're saying is true, and I believe you, we might have grounds to reopen the trust case. Fraud, possibly conspiracy." He paused, then asked gently, "Are you ready for that?" I didn't blink. I've been ready since they laid their hands on my child. I left the station with something I hadn't had in weeks, backup. But I also knew Lirien wouldn't go down without taking something from me first. That afternoon, I returned home to find the gate unlatched. I checked the locks. Everything was as I left it, except the voice recorder I kept hidden under the couch was gone. Not stolen, replaced, with a different one. I pressed play. Silence. Then a voice. Not mine. Not Taven's. Gavrin. Talking. Rambling. You think she'll last? You think she's built for this kind of war? She's not. She's soft. She always was. A pause. Then him again. Just wait. We take the kid first. Then she'll fold. I sat there frozen. My skin crawled. They knew I was recording them, and they had their own. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I drove around with a notebook and a burner phone Hale had given me, collecting whatever leverage I could. That included returning to the lawyer Dad had used when I was a teenager, an old man named Wilcox who lived above a laundromat and still used carbon paper for copies. When I told him my name, he blinked twice. You're Samuel's daughter. I nodded. His jaw clenched. They took everything from him, you know. Twisted it all up after he passed. I showed him the photo of Jillian. He sat still for a long time, then finally said, She was at the reading. What? She came with a sealed letter, said it was from your father, but the family intervened before we could read it aloud. Claimed she was a fake. And was she? He met my eyes. She didn't look like a fake to me. She looked like someone with a reason to be afraid. He scribbled an address on a yellow sticky note and handed it to me. She stayed there for a while after, before disappearing. As I walked back to my car, my hands shook. I'd been chasing ghosts, but now I had a place, a starting point. That night, I sat on the floor beside Taven's bed. His breathing was slow, even peaceful. He looked so small under the covers. I reached for his hand and whispered, I'm fighting for you, baby. I'm going to make this right. But then, my phone buzzed. A text. Blocked number. You've taken this far enough. Stop before it breaks him. Attached was a photo. Taven, taken through the living room window, that same afternoon. My breath caught. My throat burned. They weren't just watching me. They were circling him. But I wasn't running anymore. They wanted to break me, then they better be ready to watch me burn it all down first. I didn't cry when I saw the photo of Taven taken through the window. I didn't panic. I didn't scream. I burned. The rage was clean, precise, like a blade honed to perfection. And for the first time, I saw my fear not as something to survive, but as something to weaponize. Because whoever sent that message hadn't realized one thing. I wasn't alone anymore. Detective Hale called the next morning. We pulled surveillance footage from the diner. The man with Serene, his name's Vincent Marrow, private investor with a history of predatory asset seizures. Who hired him? I asked. There was a pause on the line. Technically, the loan was issued to your brother, but the financial backer behind Marrow's firm is listed under an LLC. Guess whose name is attached? I already knew. Serene. And she co-signed Gavrin's lien, he confirmed. Meaning, if the trust goes public, they lose everything, and Marrow collects. So that's why they're escalating. They're cornered, Hale said, and that makes them dangerous. I sat on the edge of my couch, staring out the window, blinds drawn halfway. We need to go public, I said. On my terms. Are you sure? They made my son a target. I'm done waiting. That night, Hale and I met at City View Park, the same place where Serene once handed me a birthday card and told me I was lucky to still have a mother at all. This time, she wasn't invited. But Gavrin was. We served him a restraining order right as he stepped out of his car. It was poetic, his smirk collapsing the second Hale showed him the sealed envelope and badge. You think this changes anything? He snapped, glancing around at the families watching nearby. A child's laughter echoed from the swings. Taven clutched my hand a little tighter. I think it changes everything, I said. He lunged because of course he did, but Hale stepped between us before I had to flinch. Make another move, Hale warned, and you'll be in cuffs before sunset. Taven looked up at me then, eyes wide. Mom? I knelt, brushing his hair back. You're safe, I promise. That was when I saw the cameras. Not news crews, phones, strangers who had seen enough to know this wasn't some family squabble. It was war, and I had nothing left to lose. We went straight from the park to the courthouse. Hale walked beside me, briefcase in one hand, expression carved from stone. The judge met with us behind closed doors, an emergency motion for a temporary protection order and a petition to reopen the trust review. I presented everything, the forged signature, the notarized lie, the link between Jillian Mercer and the original document. And then I laid down the final card, the new trust clause, the one I'd recovered from the scorched edge of the burned fragment. In the event of multiple claimants, priority shall be given to the minor heir listed in Section D. The judge leaned forward. And who is listed in Section D? I reached into my folder and pulled out a scanned copy from the lawyer's archive. Taven Rhodes, I said. My voice didn't shake. The judge nodded once. I'll review all submitted evidence by morning. If the documents hold, the trust will be frozen, effective immediately. Hale stepped in. And the custody threat? I'll have Child Protective Services put on pause. If they try another visit without cause, tell them to contact my chambers. It felt like breathing for the first time in months. We stepped outside just as the sky broke open, light rain, soft and sudden, dotting the courthouse steps. Hale looked at me. You did it. I shook my head. Not yet. Because there was still one thing left, Jillian, the missing witness, the only person besides Dad who knew the full truth, and she'd stayed hidden long enough. I spent the evening calling every Jillian Mercer in the state registry. I used burner apps, disguised numbers, public records. It took hours. But then a voice answered, older, hesitant. This is Jill. I paused, my heart in my throat. Jillian Mercer? Did you know Samuel Rhodes? Silence. Who is this? I'm Lirien, I said softly. His daughter. She didn't hang up. I heard her breathing, then a trembling inhale. I thought they'd buried you too, she whispered. My vision blurred. They tried, I said, but I'm still here. Another pause. He left something for you, something they didn't want you to see. I clutched the phone tighter. Can you meet me? A long beat, then. Tomorrow, Midway Library, 3 p.m. I'll be there. The line went dead. I sat there in the quiet, staring at the calendar on the fridge. Only one square mattered now, tomorrow. But when I turned to check the window, drawn, like always, I saw it. A single figure standing across the street, not moving, not watching, just waiting. He didn't follow me into the library, but I knew he wanted me to see him. Let me feel the breath of danger one last time before I stepped into the truth. Midway Library was quiet that afternoon, fluorescent lights buzzing, a child's whisper echoing off distant shelves. I sat in the corner booth near the window, hands still, back straight, eyes fixed on the front entrance. At exactly 3:02 p.m. she walked in, Jillian Mercer, older than the photo but unmistakable, red hair swept back in a loose clip, eyes scanning the room like someone who'd learned to expect danger around every corner. She spotted me, walked over slowly, then sat across from me like we were old friends meeting after years of silence. I wasn't sure you'd come, I said. I wasn't sure I'd survive if I didn't. I reached into my folder, pulled out the scan of the trust clause. Her name wasn't on it, but her fingerprints were everywhere. I found your hotel receipt with Gavrin, the courthouse photo. My dad wrote heir on the back. She flinched slightly, then nodded. I was supposed to be the trustee until your father changed his mind and left it for your son. They thought I'd be easy to scare off after the funeral. And were you? She folded her hands. They trembled faintly. I was pregnant when your dad passed. I blinked. No one had mentioned a child. I lost the baby, she added quickly. They never knew, but I did. And I stayed quiet because I thought it would protect his legacy. But now, her voice cracked, they're destroying it. I slid the recorder across the table. Will you give a statement? She hesitated, then placed her hand over mine. I'll do more than that. That night, Hale reviewed the audio. His mouth twitched slightly, somewhere between a smirk and grim approval. It's enough, he said. More than enough. What happens next? Court. Restraining orders. Criminal fraud if the DA agrees. But first, we serve them. Publicly. And we did. The following Saturday, Hale walked up to Serene and Gavrin in the middle of the farmers' market. The sun was high, heat warping the air. Families strolled past. Musicians played a folksy tune in the distance. She was wearing pearls again, always the costume of innocence. Until Hale handed her the envelope. This is a formal summons. You and Mr. Rhodes are to appear before the probate court on Tuesday. Pending charges include trust tampering, witness intimidation, and custodial threat. Her smile froze. Gavrin lunged again, like a broken record that refused to skip, but this time Hale had backup. 2 officers stepped in. He was cuffed before he hit the pavement, and for the first time, the people around us clapped. Not loud, but enough. By the following week, the court verified everything. Jillian's audio, my evidence, the notary's sworn affidavit. The judge's final words echoed like a closing bell. The trust, as amended, belongs to Taven Rhodes, effective immediately, and any forged transactions are nullified. Taven sat beside me in his best shirt, feet swinging above the courtroom floor. He leaned in, whispering, "Did we win?" I smiled, soft, tired. "No, baby. We ended it." A month later, we moved into a new rental, still modest, still small, but no more broken glass on the floor, no more locks checked 3 times a night. We planted a young red maple in the backyard, Taven's idea. "It'll grow with us," he said. One evening, I found him in the garage painting. A bright blue sky, a smiling sun, our old house in the distance, drawn small and crooked, but in the middle of the picture, him and me, holding hands. I framed it, because it wasn't about the house we lost. It was about the life we built after. My father used to say that love is a form of legacy, not what you leave in a will, but what you protect when no one's watching. And now I finally understood. You don't have to bleed to earn justice. You just have to decide you're worth it. Thank you for staying with me. If you've ever stood up to family for the sake of your own peace or your child's future, this story was for you. Please subscribe, like, share this story, and drop a comment if you've lived through something similar. And if you're ready for more stories of betrayal and resilience, check out the next video waiting for you now.